Yeah, we're live. We're gonna stir it up today, just just like that. Just took the doggies for run. Got to hydrate. It's all good stuff. Today we want to talk about the age-old question, or at least in the last decade or two. I think that Coyote came out in 2010 or something. So the question, the battle, the Ford Chevy thing, Mustang, Camaro, all that. The point of contention is that which one of them is better? which one of the engine platforms is better? Which one's better for boost? Let's say. So is it the Coyote? Is it the 4-valve Coyote? Or is it the LS? And what I want to do is go over the difficulties in answering that question because they're the same difficulties that we have in answering any question, especially anything with the word best in it. We just don't know. So if the, obviously we talk about the best cam or any of those things, we have to look at what is our metric. So we would first have to define, like, what do you mean by best? Is it the one that makes the most power? Is it the most affordable one? Is it the most popular one? What are all the things? What are the things that we're talking about? One guy might have his opinion on about, well, I like the Coyote because it revs to I don't know, 8,000, 10,000, whatever. Let's see. There we go. And that may be their thing. I need it to rev. Okay, that's great. Then for your thing, an overhead cam motor, maybe that's a better deal. Maybe they already have that. Maybe that's their thing and that they like it, and you're not going to convince them otherwise. We see a lot of that in the world right now, and all of that's fine. But again, you'd have to decide that, and then whatever the group of people that you're asking or trying to decide this for would also have to decide that. Okay, like we were talking about the other day, we were talking about engine masters or Eric's cam test or whatever. When you're doing something like that, you have to decide, okay, what is the metric? We did engine masters, average power, average torque, add those two together, divide by 2. It was a simple thing. Is it the best thing? Is it the best way to determine this? No, because honestly, those motors that we put together for engine masters are engine masters motors. They're not really necessarily street motors. They were way too high compression. They were on the edge. They were into detonation. So they're not good combinations for that. They were good combinations for what we were doing when we were racing dynos, essentially. They're good combinations for that. They were designed to do the thing that they were designed to do. Same thing if you build a endurance motor or a dedicated drag race motor or a tractor pull motor, whatever you're designing it for, it should be great at doing that. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's great at doing like all sorts of other things. So there's difficulty right away in that, in deciding, how do you define better? So, and really you can't even do it based on power, because the power output that you get under boost is just going to be a function of whatever you make NA. So if they both make 500 and you add boost to them at 1 bar, they both could make 1,000 horsepower. There isn't one of them that's going to be, okay, this one's at 1,000 and now this one's at 1,500 at the same boost level. That sort of thing doesn't happen. And if you use the same turbos and all that sort of thing just doesn't happen. So one of them, this notion that one of them is better for boost, is an interesting thing, and I'd like to see that happen. We have seen occasions where these motors make more than the formula. Usually there's a reason for that, but I would like to see that. So again, the metric thing would be the first thing that you'd have to cover and figure out, okay, what are you deciding? Because for some, the answer would come very quickly here. If you go to the wrecking yard and try to find a Coyote, and you go to the wrecking yard and find an LS, and I don't know how it is now, but back in the day, the Coyote was 10 times as much as the LS was. It's probably not that way anymore. But, to go get a Coyote might have been a few $1,000s. To get a Coyote or to get an LS, it was a few $100s. So it wouldn't have made any difference, even if a case could be made that the Coyote was a lot better. It's more expensive. It's more complicated. It would throw off a lot of people that wouldn't pick that, even if you could even if there was a case to be made that it was way better. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, let's say that we were going to ask lots of people. So we were going to have a vote on which one of those is better. And we'll talk about the problems associated with that. Not that we don't already have problems with deciding exactly what the best is, but let's say that we were going to take a vote. So the question is, which one's better for boost, a Coyote or an LS? So we send off this question to the automotive industry. We go over first to the Coyote groups, Joe's House of Super Boosted Coyotes, Coyotes Rule, LS's Drool, whatever the name of their group is. We go over there, we pose this question, and let's say that we get 1,000 answers back. Okay, and let's say, not surprisingly, that when we ask this group of Coyote enthusiasts, because they're all Coyote groups, we ask them which one's better, a Coyote or an LS. 90% of them say unequivocally that out of the 1,000 horsepower, 90% of them say that the Coyote's better. And we get a 10% on the LS side because maybe there were LS guys hanging out over with the Coyote guys, if nothing else, just to rib them and give them a hard time. So we got, we asked the Coyote group, which we know that the Coyote group is not as big as the LS group. If you look at the LS aftermarket compared to the Coyote, it's dramatically bigger. 10 times, 100 times. I don't know what the number is, but it's a lot. The LS community and that industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry right now. Just in the same way that the 5-liter market was back in the day. There's so many heads for it. There's so many intake manifolds. There's so many camshafts. There's so many blowers, turbos, just all sorts of things for that are catering to that. And it's a gigantic one. The Coyote is much, much smaller. And that doesn't take away from the value of the motor. That's not saying that it's not a good motor. It's just that, fewer guys are going to change 4 cams that are going to change 1 cam. If you can change a $179 cam, if you get one from me on the LS, or even a $200 or $300 cam versus a $1,200 or $1,500 cam swap for the Coyote, it's not hard to understand why one of these markets is very big and one of them obviously is decidedly smaller. So back to our voting. So we asked the Coyote groups and we got 1,000 responses. 90% of them, again, not surprisingly, are Coyote guys. They answered the Coyote's better. So we have 900 votes for the Coyote and 100 for the LS because we've only asked the Coyote community. Then we go ask the LS community. And we get 2,000 responses for the LS. Probably we would be more than that based on the size, but we get 2,000. I go, okay. And not surprisingly, because they're LS guys, the vast majority of them answer yes. So, but we'll say that it's not even as one-sided on the LS side. Let's say that 80% of them said yes, the LS is better for whatever reason, and the 20% are saying no, that Coyote is actually pretty good, because out in the LS community, which is most of the automotive world, there's still lots of Coyote guys out there. So we got we got a different split with the LS guys. We got 80% and 20% for the Coyote. So the thing is, if we add all of those numbers up, we got 900 that voted for the Coyote on the Coyote group, and we got 400 that voted for the Coyote on the LS group. That gave us a total of 1,300. Only 100 voted for the LS out of the Coyote group, and 1,600 voted for the LS out of the LS group. Smaller percentage, but a bigger number because there was more of them. And so in this comparison that we look at, we got 1,700 that voted for the LS. And we got 1,300 that voted for the Coyote. That's actually fairly close. And I don't think it would be that close, but that's actually fairly close using our example. And it works out fairly well. If you apply this to the way that they count presidential ballots, it's exactly the same. For the last 10, it doesn't matter who you like. I don't care if you're red or I don't care if you're blue. But if you look at it, this same thing has happened in the last 10 elections. So it doesn't matter what guy, like for Reagan or Bush or whoever you like, that's fine. But when they count the ballots, they count all the walk-in ballots. Well, guess what the highest percentage of voters that walk in, guess which side they vote on. And then the mail-in, then after that, they count the mail-in ballots. Guess which most of those guys are? Mail-in guys, or they're the blue guys, and the walk-in guys are the red guys. And so you get this big skew like we got with our Coyote thing. A lot of guys don't realize that's what's happened in the last, it might be more than 10. But if you go back and track all of these, which I've done, you look at it and go, look, that's the same. You get this big jump, and then you get this changeover, and then you get this big jump, and you get a change. And it doesn't matter how it ends up, but this is what always happens. And a lot of guys, because they haven't done the research on it, don't understand that. and you can see the problems with our Coyote LS thing. Even before we got to asking people what the issue was, or which one that you like more, you got to define that, and that's really hard enough. And for me, looking at these, because I have a Coyote Turbo thumbnail up because I've run Coyotes and they work really good. I get questions all the time from people saying, "Hey, look, what's your favorite motor, or do you like this one more, or is this one better?" I don't know. I like it. Like, a Coyote's an awesome motor. I've made more. I think I've made more horsepower per cubic inch with a Coyote than I have with anything, with any other motor. I think it has the highest. It had the highest BMAP number. I know that. And so I think that it had the highest specific torque. So if my metric when I was choosing that, when somebody said, "Hey, what's your favorite one?" If that was it, I could tell them that. But by me telling them that doesn't mean that that's my favorite one. That's just me providing data. Hey, look, the Coyote did this. The Coyote guys might jump on that and go, "Oh, well, that's the reason why it's the best engine ever made." No, it just does that. And then these other things, these other engines do all of these things over here, and I'm just providing information. One of the things I get in this live feed a lot too, is guys want to put their decision making on me, and they say, "Well, if this was your motor, what would you do?" Well, if you look at my truck outside, you can see what I chose. I chose to leave it alone, and nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear, "Well, it's all stock," because that's the choice I made for that truck, because I need to have something that's dead reliable and something that's not going to break down, because I've had lots of cars that have broken down many times driving particularly from not so much here, not so much from Northern California to Southern California, but when I lived in Vegas a lot. The Sprint broke down a couple of times. I've had other motors break down on this trip also, where I had to stop and effect repairs and find a ditch that had water in it to fill it back up, all sorts of things. It's much better to have at least one reliable thing. And not that this truck isn't, it's not perfect. The check engine lights are all on and all that stuff. So it's not perfect, but it's important to have one like that you can rely on. And then I have other cars that are, and also I get to play with an almost unlimited amount of engines on the dyno and make all the changes and get all the G-Wiz stuff, because when you do a whole bunch of cam swaps, you're like, I'm not really sure I want to put a cam swap in my truck. But I get to do that. And so I get it feeds that part of me that I need to do all that stuff. And it's really fun on the dyno. But I want a reliable thing. And my point is that when people are asking me, "Well, what would you do?" Well, it's not what I would do doesn't make any difference. What Joe Schmo would do, or your friend or your buddy or your uncle or your aunt, whoever it is, it doesn't matter what they would do. You got to pick what speaks to you. And that's why I do all this testing. So you guys get to choose. Would you pick a Vortex supercharger over a Kenny Bell? Well, here's the power curves. Which one is going to work for you? Which one do you like best? Are you going to pick a turbo, or are you going to pick nitrous? Whatever. I don't know. Here's the data. You guys get to choose. And again, as we've said many times in the past, just the data really is not enough. The data that I'm providing might not be enough for you to make a decision, because I don't give you any sort of drivability. Sometimes I give you idle vacuum or things like that. Very rarely do I give you an idle clip, although I will try to start doing that more, because that seems to be very important for a lot of people. So I can try to include that, because I, try to listen to the viewers and give them what they want. But even all of that is not enough. You don't really know like what a camshaft is going to do, what cylinder heads are going to do. You might know what they'll do at wide open throttle, but that's hardly the only metric for making that decision. So we'll see what you guys got. In fact, we'll ask our Coyote. Let's see here. Giving people more information is always better. Okay, is the 5-liter Coyote better for boost than the LS? And see, we never even determined which LS we were talking about, because the LS doesn't have a 5-liter. We got a 4.8, we got a 5.3, we got a 5.7, got a 6.2, which is really what the Coyote would have been. The marketplace competitor for the Coyote would have been a 6.2 LS3. You know, bigger is bigger, better. Bigger, more, better. LQ4 is best for boost. I agree. An LQ4, I would say, is better than an LM7 for boost, or an LR4. YouTube, I had to ditch Katrina, unfortunately. I don't know if that was a bot or what the deal was. I prefer the LS. Most big Coyote guys just have a massive budget. I think you could say that the Coyote is more expensive to do, I would think. Certainly if you're thinking about camshafts, it is. Coyote versus LS for boost. I'm gonna have to listen in on this one. Dollars for dollars, I don't think a Coyote can beat an LS. For, like we talked about that, for cost, if that's the metric, like I said, I think that would immediately put a lot of people off. Because if we know we can still, for right now anyway, go to wrecking yards and find LSs. I've still yet to see a Coyote in a wrecking yard. The LQ4 is expensive enough. We don't want the junkyard charging more than they already are. Yeah. But yeah, what I meant to say is all the LS motors are way too expensive in wrecking yards. So do we need to keep throwing that out there? Head flow is 10 times better on a Coyote. I mean, there's no comparison. You think that a Coyote head flows more than an LS3 head? I don't think a stock Coyote head does. Not for peak flow. I just scored a 6.2 6L80, my local wrecking yard. First one I've ever seen. You got the motor and the transmission? Coyote head versus a 5.3 head. Maybe that's an LS3 head flows. Yeah, an LS3 head flows a ton. A 5.3 head is not close to a Coyote head. Can't debate the weight of the engines. What's a Coyote weigh compared to an aluminum LS? It sucks that Ford guys will use it, but it's bigger argument because the LS3 is probably the closest. Yeah, it definitely is the marketplace competitor. When the Coyote was running, nobody was comparing a Coyote to a 5.3 or a 4.8 because those were truck motors. If you wanted to compare the truck 5-liter to a truck 4.8 or 5.3 or a 6.0, because the Coyote probably wasn't the highest horsepower gas motor offered in the trucks, right? Unless you did a Raptor or something. I don't know what the engine offerings were. Coyote stuff is too expensive. I'm an LS guy. I have a couple of F bodies I'm doing turbos on. My wife has a Coyote that I'll do a single T4 system on. Turbo Coyote it's a good motor. Now, when I say make more horsepower, I mean up to a certain limit. After that, the LS rules. To make it equal, put one cam and 16 valves in each motor. It doesn't need to be that. The motors are different. Difference is okay. The problem is the Coyote is too expensive. LT7. The LT7 is impressive. LS is by far superior. Coyote for the win. Everybody gets to have the thing that they want. How about Hayabusa motor will produce more horsepower per cubic inch? Troy, I appreciate that. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's appreciated. Coyote timing chains give me a headache, but in the same token, as a diehard GM guy, it produces too many impressive results. Yeah, it's not, you can't say that it doesn't make power. It definitely does. Austin, this is why the Engine Labs LS 5-liter is so necessary. I don't understand why you think it's necessary. It's not at all necessary to compare them at the same displacement. If you want to do that, that's the same thing as saying that you need to compare heads with the same combustion chamber. No, you need to compare the stock heads, because that's what we're comparing. We're doing a comparison between two stock heads. No, you got to make the compression. No, you don't have to do that. You don't have to modify one to make it equal the other. That's not the same thing. Same thing with a 5-liter. Now, a 5-liter LS is a cool thing to do, and you can do it a couple of different ways. You could do a 4.8 with a bigger bore. You could do you could de-stroke a 6-liter, which is what they did back in the Daytona prototype days. They had a 5-liter displacement limit, and they used a 4-inch bore motor, and they made 3-inch strokes for them, and they made a 302 out of that, and made a 5-liter or a 305. I don't know the exact bore and stroke. It was a 3-inch stroke crank, so maybe they did a 4030 bore or something on it. Whatever the rules would allow for because I think that the limit was a 5-liter displacement. Need to have a stock vehicle and then a toy. Yeah, I agree. It's like the Omni. Can anybody suggest a vendor for a 6-liter LS and a 4L80 junkyard engine so I can tear apart and stroke it? Been to the local junkyard a lot and came up with nothing every time. You're gonna have to check some in different areas, or 2 toys and hope one runs. You could do that. You could go on a wing and a prayer. I believe Coyote makes more horsepower per inch. I think up to a limit, stock for stock. Did the 4.8 Big Bang motor not make the same horsepower per cubic inch? No, not NA. It didn't. I'm an LS guy, but the Coyote cannot be ignored when it comes to its ability to make power. It does. It makes good NA power. It's got lots of head flow. It's got RPM potential. It's got really good intake manifolding. It's got all the stuff. Let's see. Scrolling. My favorite is based on how many videos Richards has made to educate us. Well, I think my videos tend to reflect the marketplace. Like I said, the LS market is way bigger than the Coyote market is. More air means more fuel and more power. LC9 for the win. I agree. I think an aluminum LS, especially an aluminum 5.3, I really have a soft spot for, because a 5-liter flow is the same as an LS3 head. What are the main factors for fuel pressure to drop under load? Two in the tank 340s, -8. They Y into a -10, and -8 return, Holley regulator, Holley rails, 210 Bosch, 6-liter turbo. The thing that I would look at, I would test voltage to see if you have a voltage drop going to the pumps. Then I would check other things that you can check is if you can check pressure before the Y and after the Y. Also, I would check any sort of fuel filter that you have. Drops to 40 under load. I would also check and make sure that your regulator is adjusted properly. Because if you have a whole bunch of, or you could also do this, depending on whether or not you have whether it's backfeeding or not, whether you have a backflow valve on it, you could disconnect one of the pumps. and then reset your regulator. Because here's what happens on fuel pressure regulators. If you've got way too much fuel pump supplying the fuel pressure regulator and you're trying to adjust it and the fuel pressure regulator can't bleed off enough fuel, like it can't send that fuel back to the tank, then what you have is a false static reading. And you don't know what the reading is until you're trying to use it. And once you're using more fuel, you'll get to the real actual static reading. So you may have set it at, let's say, 58 PSI, but because you haven't allowed enough of it to bypass to actually get a real setting, the setting isn't that high. So what you've actually set it at maybe 10 PSI or 20 or 30 PSI, and then it can't support your power level with that static fuel pressure. Which one? It's not a surface question. Not on paper, definitive. I think up to 20 PSI on the stock motor, the Coyote is superior. Anything else, all the bets are off. If they both make the same NA power, they both make the same power at 20 PSI. Also, there's a 7-liter. Yeah, that we don't compare that. That's a really low production figure. Seems some Coyotes at Copart. Why is the Coyote banned from Engine Masters? They don't have a class for that car. I mean, for that motor. They don't have any overhead cam motors. No overhead cam and no 4-valve motors. I got a dual stage relay setup, one pump on and the second one kicks on at 5 PSI. I think it's a current performance plug and play, but I upsized the wire and didn't reach the battery. The Ford Illuminator. Yep, those are good. I've replaced my fuel filter already. The thing that a lot of people have, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to go over this, is the thing that human beings, all of us, have trouble with, and particularly younger people, is that they have a hard time coming to grips with the fact that two things can both be good. An LS can be good, and a Coyote can be good. And that if one is good, it doesn't take anything away from the other one also being good. And that's I know that people are laughing at that, but that's reality. And people have a hard time with that. They think if they think that they need to put down the other thing to elevate their thing. And that's not, it's not effective. That's what really needs to be compared, an LT7 versus a Coyote or an LT6. So you want to compare a 1,000 horsepower twin turbo direct injected motor to a Coyote? Yeah, that's not a comparison. My question is, which one lasts longer under a reasonable amount of boost, like 9 pounds? Most of us don't have endless wallets. That needs to be a metric of measure. Well, it needs to be your metric, certainly. That if, like I said, and when I was talking about it earlier, everybody decides what their thing is. What is their best? Well, for you, that's the metric. It not only has to take whatever boost we're talking about, but it has to do it for a long period of time. Obviously, that would be a difficult thing to measure, or at the very least, a very time-consuming thing to measure. I honestly don't think 9 pounds of boost is going to be a problem for any of those motors for longevity. If the tune is correct on that and they have ring gap in them, enough ring gap, whatever that number is, they have enough of that, I don't think that that's going to be an issue at all. 9 pounds of boost on a motor that wasn't designed for boost isn't going to last as long as an NA motor, but it's 99 point something percent of the time going to last longer. If you did a good job, it's going to last longer than you own your motor. Just bought a stock LS2 from a Trailblazer SS, wanting to get roughly 700 to 800 to the wheels. Would a camshaft and a 76 turbo get me there, or should I go smaller twins? It doesn't make any difference whether you choose twins or a single. You can get there with either one of those. The choice between those is usually a packaging deal. So whichever one you like better, they'll both do that as long as you size them properly. 800 of the wheels is a single 78, 75 kind of deal. You could get there with twin 3076s. Just matters how you want to package it. Just bought a stock. I'm scrolling back. Let's see here. Just bought a stock LS2. Okay. Already see my more Coyote builds. We may do more Coyote testing. I don't know that I'll do builds on them. Richard, do you think the Coyote's abilities are more attributed to being a double override cam, 32 valve, or it's a factory compression ratio or combination of both? Everything matters. If you're trying to make power, everything matters. Compression matters, displacement matters, head flow matters, and not just peak head flow, which is normally the thing that we talk about, but average head flow, curtain area, all of these things, the intake manifolding design, exhaust manifolds, everything matters when it comes to power output. Richard, have you dynoed a Gen 3 Coyote? I have not a DI motor. They have at West Tech, but I wasn't part of that. Assuming a race series that is displacement to weight ratio with no, so you're making a specific argument here, with no power, if you have to use stock intake and heads, but cams and exhausts are free, which one would you use? So you also have to have displacement in there. So I'm taking it you're a Coyote guy, right? Just like the Cleveland head can valve is banned from sprint car engines. Richard is correct. My wife's Coyote Mustang is fast as hell with a tune. The other thing that helps with the Coyote stuff is the transmission that's coupled to the Coyote is very impressive. Coke and Pepsi before they started hating their customers. We knew why it's banned. The 4-valve head from Engine Masters became John Kazi's, makes huge power and beats the Chevys. Well, John Kazi wasn't the only one there that did the 4-valve motor. And there's a lot of controversy with that particular test. AccuFab was there, and there was another one that was there too. And they all made good power. LS, Coyote, Hemi, all three are very capable engines. LS is my favorite, but I like that they all make power. Yep, that's right. Now, don't be talking sense. If I have something good, that means it's impossible for you to have something equally good. That's not exactly like mine. Exactly. Better motor is the one you have. Build is a build. Having fun beating it up. I agree. If I have a 69 Z28 and somebody else has a 69 or a 70 Boss 302, they're both good. I would take either one of them. LS is not as efficient as the overhead cam 4-valve, so for us cheap guys, boosts are handicapped, so we can still win the race. You're welcome to choose the thing that you want to choose. All that's good. I mean, I have a turbo LS, but the Coyotes do sound good. They do sound different. A Coyote definitely has a different, like, full throttle sound to it. Car Farm, what's up? I sent a message to Freiberger about the Omni. I like them both. Coyotes boosted sounds good. They do, and they sound good at. I think. Well, I was gonna say I have run a Coyote at higher RPM than the LS. I've only run the LS to 8,000. I think I've run the Coyote above that. I think I've run 8,500 on the Coyote. But they sound impressive because we had cams in it and ported heads and stuff. Is the 5-liter Coyote better for boost than the LS? It's pretty close. 47% are choosing the Coyote and 53% are choosing the LS. I think that's indicative of the LS market being bigger. Per question on power to displacement ratio, SCCA has these types of rules. So does Bonneville. You race or you choose the class that you're in based on displacement. A little off topic, but have you tested a 6.2 Ford versus 6.2 GM? I have not. I've never run a 6.2 Ford on the dyno. Austin, you've said before that the 317 port, the intake port is basically the same design as the 243-799. So if one had the piston to match the compression of the 243s, would the dyno result be the same between the two? No. If we assume that like the 799 had a flat top piston, you'd have to have a dome piston, which is not as good. But the big difference, and I don't think that would make too much of a difference. The big difference is the combustion chamber on the 790 or on the 243 head, 243-799 is different than the 317 head. The 317 head is not, the chamber on the 317 head is not as efficient. It does not make as much power as the 243-799 chamber does. How do I get an NA cam shirt? Yeah, I haven't done one of those. We need a factory stock style NASCAR race. Oh, so you want him to run for 500 miles like that? Out of the box, no other mods besides Boost. Coyote, you'll pick the Coyote? Good. You should always pick the one you want. I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth. Extreme Raceway is a wicked awesome drag strip. Many different classes of racing. Let me tell you something. The little Coyotes in every form of LS are racing big blocks. Yes, sir, Richard. The transmission program that Ford is absolutely awesome. The car shifts in milliseconds. It is impressive. My buddy Jimmy has one. His isn't a new one, but I think his is a 19 maybe. But the transmissions are really impressive. I think a big part of what the performance envelope of that car is. As much as I'd like to have a Coyote, I think my next toy will be a big block. Also a good choice. You mentioned revving. Is there anything really needed aside from a decent set of springs to rev a 5-liter and shift at 7,000 regularly? Do you want it to make power at 7? Because revving it to 7 is it's going to be on the far downside of the curve if you have a stock camshaft in it. So it's not going to do you any good to run it to 7,000 RPM. You want to make power there. And then a cam and springs, the right cam and the right springs, and you can run to 7,000 all the time. What's the equalizer cost? Stock 87 octane. The LT7 makes 1,060 out of the box. In our comparison, where we're talking about here, we're talking about 2 different NA motors that you're adding boost to. We're not talking about the super wazoo kind of dedicated deal. Can you run an LS with a small dome diamond piston 12-to-1 compression with 10 pounds of boost? Yes, with enough octane and intercooling. I don't know why you would do that. Would you EcoBoost swap anything, say an 80s or 90s T-Bird? I think an EcoBoost 4-cylinder in a SVO Mustang, like an SVO Mustang Tribute car with a super pissed off EcoBoost, I think would be really cool. Because it's a lot better than the Pinto motor that it came with. Need a camshaft with an arc intake runner. Yeah, match. No, that's good. Cam's currently a BTR Truck Norris and BTR 660 springs, but currently shifted at 6,600. A Truck Norris cam is not going to make peak power at 7,000, but it definitely will go there. And I would argue that a 660 spring on a Truck Norris cam is not what you want. It would be better if you had a spring that was a 550 lift spring, with the truck Norris cam. It's amazing that DI motors with high compression ratios can still run on pump gas with boost. Yep. If you don't give it any fuel in there to detonate with, then it helps with detonation. So the head intake port design is the same as the 317, but the combustion chamber design is more efficient. Yes. The 243-799 chamber is more efficient than the 317. They flow about the same, but the chamber design is different. The 1.5 EcoBoost in my Fusion is fun to drive. Don't they have a bigger EcoBoost than that? Don't they have a 2.5 liter one? That's the one that I would pick, I think. You know, you'd pick the big block 4-cylinder because that, you know, that's the cool one. There. Mustang EcoBoost is 2.3. That's what I thought. That's the one I would pick. I would pick a 2.3 just to stay, you know, to stay consistent with your tribute car. Found valve flow at my 350 with a 268 cam. 6700 is where the springs give up control. That should be way beyond where the 268 cam is making power anyway. The new coating on the country road is no longer the correct surface for full throttle traction. DI still injects fuel on intake stroke. The fuel is there during compression, but all the cooling happens in the cylinder, so they're able to run higher pressure without without detonation. Direct injection doesn't inject otherwise they wouldn't have to have such high fuel pressures. Direct injection doesn't inject the fuel until there's very high pressure in the cylinder. It's late in the stroke. How much horsepower and boost can the pintle motor handle? I've seen them make really big power with those on modified versions. It's a lot. I've seen a lot of people comment about flow velocity versus simple flow numbers. Can you educate me on that as well? I don't know what their definition of that is, so I don't know what they're talking about. When you're talking about the power potential versus head flow, you have to look at a lot of different things. You have to look at the flow potential all the way through the lift range, like at every lift at 50,000 lift, 100, because if you just look at the peak flow at the peak valve lift, it doesn't tell you anything. You have to look at how much it flows through the whole curve. You have to look at the flow relative to the valve size. You have to look at the flow relative to the port dimension. You have to look at a lot of stuff. And even if you have all that information, unless you put the head on and run it on the dyno, you don't know what the head's going to do. You don't know for certain. You might have an idea. Do you think a 3.9 crank is more advisable than a 4-inch crank in a Chevy Performance LS3 block due to piston slap, or is the sleeve long enough in the LS3? I wouldn't go more than 4-inch, but I wouldn't have any problem going to a 4-inch. I wouldn't go to a 4.100 or a 4.125, not on a stock sleeve length. What cam do I need for low RPM power for towing on an LS? The stock cam works really good for that. But I have yet to see a towing application where you're like at what people talk about towing and they think, okay, well, I need lots of torque at 2000 RPM for towing. I have never seen anybody when they're needing power to be at wide open throttle at 2000 RPM. I have never seen that. Whenever you're towing something, like in my truck, when I tow stuff, if you're towing something and you need lots of power, you're like going up a grade, you're in a different gear and you're at a different RPM range. You're at 3,000 or something. So that's where you're going to need the power. And camshafts will do that. They're just not going to add a lot of power at 1,500 or off idle or wherever people say that they want it. Did the first start on my Kennyville supercharged Ford's 6-liter with a big NA cam. Excited to see what it makes. Cool. Done many test hits out there and tuned the slapper bars. Making a test hit today after doing the brakes. Didn't even try to hook up. Darren Morgan has really good videos about airflow and velocity. There's an awful lot to consider when you're looking at that. But again, what I like to see is I watch a lot of Dave Vizard stuff, and I've read a lot of books and looked at a lot of this stuff. But unless you take something off of the flow bench or off of some sort of discussion and then put it on a combination and run it on the dyno, you don't know how what you've done translates to the dyno unless you have that data. You have to have that data to be able to correlate that. You think an LS3 block with a 4.125 stroke and a 407 bore will live a while on a single turbo? No, I think that's a horrible idea. Unless you've sleeved the block. I think if you're running boost, you don't need any of that. You don't even need a stroker motor, because an LS3 block with E85 with a stock stroke and a stock bore will take you way beyond what that block will take. Richard, do you think a 215 trick flow head that flows 320 at 600 won't be adequate for a 408 stroke or short block? I just got built, might be 11-1. That doesn't make any difference. The displacement doesn't worry me. The compression doesn't worry me. How much power are you trying to make? Like, how big a cam are you putting in this? And what intake are you putting in this? And how high are you trying to rev it? If you're telling me you're trying to make 700 horsepower, that's not enough cylinder head. If you're trying to make 600, that's enough cylinder head. Or if you're trying to only make 500, it's more than enough cylinder head. Can you create a men's lotion that smells like blue Loctite? Only if it tastes like Loctite. Because isn't Loctite the stuff that tastes really good? I think it is. Make it smell like leaded fuel. My wife likes the smell of like carb cleaner or brake cleaner. I married the right one. Is a big nasty cam Summit's version of the Truck Norris Chopper cam? It's not. The big nasty cam is not that. Going to use it instead of a turbo cam in my stock bottom end. I wouldn't pick that cam. I would pick a different cam. If you wanted a camshaft for an NA application and something that had a real aggressive idle, because that's why they made that cam. They just made it for sound. I've run that cam and showed what it did for power, but I think you would be better off with a Truck Norris cam or a Chopper Copper cam or one of my low buck truck camshafts. I think what you'll find is that it's going to be soft down low, because that's what kind of cam it is. And it's not, I think you'd be happier with a different cam. Get something to smell like nitromethane. I don't think you want to smell that stuff. Yep, Car Farm. I know. See, that's what I'm talking about. Carb cleaner is good stuff. Had the LS balancer, Bluetooth at speed with forged crank, 408 stroker, 10.5-1. Now looking at 14-1. Richard, the rule of thumb is 3 to 4% per each 1 full point of compression, but that's in the sweet spot. You get less of a gain past 12-1. So something less than that. Our Johnson tie bar lifters advise in an LS you want to run to 8,000 RPM. And what cam would you advise on a 6.2 with RHS 260 heads? You can use link bar lifters. We didn't use it on our 8,000 RPM deal. You can use link bar lifters. I would be more concerned about them, or more advising you that they should be a short travel lifter, and that your push rod length should be right, and that your camshaft should be a stable cam profile that wants to run at that RPM, and that your springs are matched to that stable camshaft, and that they are set up so that they have the right amount of coil bind clearance, meaning not too much and obviously not too little. Is there a better or a comparable hydraulic roller short travel link bar lifter than the Johnson 2116s? I don't know. I don't have part numbers memorized for that. Is the LS Coyote better for boost than the LS 4951? We're getting close. The Coyote did good on our mock vote. It's like having a mocktail. That's not good. Oh, let's see. Right now, there's a perfect time. Oh, man. I tried to get it. I tried to end it right at 50-50, but it didn't do it. So somebody else get in there and vote. Somebody throw some votes up there for the Coyote so we can end it at a 50-50. There. The cam I'm running on the Kenny Bell is a 234 or 242. 11 plus 3. Got it to actuate the bypass valve, so it will work well enough. There you go. And we nailed it right at 50-50. See, that's perfect. See, they're just one love. Like Coyote guys and LS guys coalescing and coming together, and everything's good. The Kenny Bell works well, like most positive displacement blowers, works well on a combination that makes good NA power. So that camshaft should work good. Richard, what do you think about ProMax LS3 style 6-bolt heads? I don't think that I've ever tested them, so I couldn't give you an answer on that. How about the Flowtech LS3s? Again, I haven't tested those. I'll have a local guy do the head work. Have you messed with any of these? Or do they already come ported? I would think that they would already come ported, right? If they're at least the equal of stock heads, then you're going to be okay. And then anything above that is going to be better. In most cases, people don't have enough motor for what the flow potential and power potential of an LS3 ported head is anyway. So I think you're fine. With the same turbo with the Coyote, show higher boost, do small runners. No, it's not a size thing. It's a power output thing. So whatever the NA power curve looked like, if it was making less power than the bigger LS, we would see a higher boost level there, assuming that we had a turbo that was, well, no, it wouldn't even do that. If we had a turbo that was restricted by boost, it would show the same boost. If we had some sort of blower on there, then we might see a change in boost based on the power output. The other thing that you can do with a Coyote is you can throw the boost numbers way off by altering the cam timing, because you can do that electronically, which is nice. I'm not a Ford guy by any means. Doesn't matter, but those blowers and turbo Coyotes are tough to beat. They're fast. Yeah, there's no doubt that if you look at what both of the engine platforms do, NA and boosted, they can both make lots of power. There's no denying that. Nobody, you can't say that, hey, one is better than the other, because they both make lots of power. And that's good. Everybody should have lots of power, even Chevy Sprint turbo guys. But lots is it's a relative thing. At what point do you believe it's necessary to upgrade the LS engine block to a dart block? I think you could get away with, it depends on what you're doing. If you're trying to race on a budget, an aluminum 5.3 block or an iron block on an LS, you can make lots of passes at like 1,000 plus horsepower. If you're trying to do 1,500 horsepower stuff, you're going to be able to make passes if everything's exactly right. but you're going to be able to make lots fewer passes. And that seems to be where guys start talking about things moving around and needing a better block. And a lot of those guys, guys that are running junkyard motors, guys that can afford getting a block don't want to drive over the crank. That's always their thing. Whenever I talk to Freiberger about that, I'm like, dude, you just need to run a junkyard turbo LS at Bonneville. He goes, nope, I don't want to drive over the crankshaft. I get that. That would be important, especially at 200 plus miles an hour. Stopped having brand loyalty with anything back in 2006. It's good that you remember when that happened. Tony Mamo has some 243s that flow 359. Those are 100 CFM higher than as cast, but doesn't that seem like a low flow rate for $4,500? Am I thinking about it the wrong way? No, yet Austin, that's you. You get to decide what the value of cost versus whatever you're buying is. Each individual gets to do that. There's no universal for that. I'm not ever in the market I don't have the financial wherewithal to spend $4,500 on cylinder heads. So it wouldn't make any difference if they flowed 459 CFM. That's not something that I can buy. So that, for me, that's not a thing. The question becomes, do you have a motor that can take advantage of that? Can it take advantage of that at whatever flow rate whatever lift value you're getting for that? There would be a lot to consider there. Poll answer, what's the power goal? Up to 800, 900 wheel horsepower stock, everything Coyote will do, but an LS would need some bottom end work. 900 wheel horsepower, an LS doesn't need any bottom end work, other than possibly ring gap, but that's still all stock. We're going to set up a Discord group for everyone to get together and chat, post pictures, and talk with like-minded people. I don't know what Discord is. Isn't that the pay thing? We're all here talking anyway, right? We're all like-minded. Hello, engineering. And from Southern Sudan, I need to have enough experience in machinery and how I'll get where I can learn techniques online. So are you doing machinery over in Sudan? You need to see the Holdner cams on the front page of the eBay deals. I would comfortably run a junkyard LS with 600 wheel horsepower, stock, everything. You need to look at my channel more and see, we've already done 1,500 with stock stuff, and we've done 100 runs over 1,000 horsepower. So 600 wheel horsepower is a number that people are driving around for 100,000 miles at 600 wheel horsepower. Is this stuff your full-time job? Yes, this is what I do. Is it true that the LS was designed from the 351 Windsor? One of those is Ford and one of those is Chevy, so they're in different places. Discord is yet just another social media thing to keep up with. I think we have too many places to talk already, and value information gets lost. I don't know what that is. I think that they've sent me stuff about coming to them, but it's me paying a percentage or something to them. How many points of collaboration do you need? I have a hard time keeping up with all that I'm doing anyways. Discord is largely used by gamer nerds to talk smack while Minecrafting. My kids did Minecrafting a lot when they were younger. Living in Colorado would suck if you're trying to make horsepower. You mean at elevation? Is that what you're talking about? I look at the positive side of that and think, well, I just run more boost if I'm at elevation. At 1,000 plus wheel horsepower, the Coyote would need a lot more money put into it. Both will be 427 inches. What turbo would I need for low power stock, everything else on an LS? Well, it depends on, if you just tell me the power output, the videos that I have up. So if you look at the cheap, like eBay turbos that I've tested, like the GT45, those are a couple $100, and those will be like 700 horsepower on an LS. Caterpillar is greatly reducing jobs in Illinois. Is that is that like an employment update? Gallagher and Dickey made 2,000 horsepower on a stock L8T block. Yeah, on the block, right? Did they upgraded the internals on that, right? The 10-year-old lives on Minecraft. What kind of hot side turbo would you recommend for something around a 383 or 427? That's not nearly enough information. I choose turbos based on whatever your power output requirement is. Have you tested the ATI versus the fluid damper? Aren't those the same thing? And there would be no way to test that on the dyno because the dampers don't usually change power dramatically unless you change the diameter or the weight. It's really hard to measure frequency changes. We got 1 more minute. Man, this went fast. Fast. Car farm. Ben, when am I coming back? I'm getting pumped for the long drive. For the audience, best way to get a fuel line to pump through, go to a Silverado fuel hat. Are you trying to have a return line go back through there? Doesn't the fuel line already go through the fuel hat? Like the budget junkyard builds? Those are good. Maybe low on snakes because you've had a kitten outbreak. I'm surprised that the raccoons haven't gotten to the kittens. If they're mousers. If I decide to install turbo on my 5.3 for towing like a boat and stuff, do I need to now like about underhood heat? You need to be concerned about that, yeah. Need a bigger AN fuel line. So you can drill through them and put a bulkhead fitting in there. Working on 1,000 horsepower stock bottom end LS at the minute. Yeah, we've done lots of those. Turbo blanket. Turbo blankets are good. We ran those on bondable cars. Best part about a cheap junkyard LS build is that if it blows up, it's fun and well lasted. I know I don't even like putting expensive builds on the engine dyno. It's just too scary. Boostworks, thank you very much. Did you have another question? Stock bottom end LS. If you're doing the 1,000 horsepower deal, make sure to put ring gap in it. You will be happy. And so will your pistons. So will your ring lands. And on that note, I would be nervous. I own one of those aluminum rod Hemis. Yeah, excuse me. On that note, it is time to go. I'll see you guys all tonight. And we're ending.